All right, we're going to go on and get started. Good evening, scholars. Welcome to week 2 of Zoom. I hope everyone has had a safe and productive week thus far. I don't know if the effects of COVID-19 has made it to your district like it has mine, but it's been a busy week of adjusting and working from home and creating virtual schools on the spot. So, life is so uncertain. But hey, we educators. So teachers, principals, nobody's more flexible than us in adjusting. And so I know if your life has been anything like mine, it's been busy this week. So let's jump straight in. Let's go first of all, talk about some housekeeping things, and then we'll dive in into the learning. So the first thing you guys are going to talk about is the adjustments, because some of the assignments that you're going to be required to do requires you to do research, which means you have to talk to the principal through email, phone call, those kind of things, talk to teachers and those kind of things. So with school being out, those assignments are still going to be due, but it won't be a due date on those. As long as they're done by week 6 and you have those in, it won't be counted as late. Now, every week we have to do a chapter reflection for the first 5 weeks. Those things are due. Those things will have due dates on there in forms, but anything that requires you to go out and do research, you don't have to worry about where a due date on it, because I know we've making adjustments. You're not in most people are not at a school, so therefore you now are communicating virtually through email, Google Classroom, and all those kind of things with teachers and stuff like that. So we just make adjustments as we go. Everybody should be fine, so it shouldn't be a big deal. But I'll let you know when it's upcoming. Like I think this week is a principal interview, talking to the principal. So my thing is, if you can't get it done this week, you can't get it done next week or the week after. The longest is done by week 6, you'll be great with that. And so that means you can interview you can email the questions, you can do a phone call the questions, however you want to do it. With it, it's just that I don't want you to be pressured trying to get everything done the week of with you not being in school full time. So do you guys kind of understand that? All right. And so next, please try to log in and check your emails on Thursdays by 5 o'clock, because normally I'm going to post a Zoom by 5 o'clock. But then also I pretty much have graded assignments and giving you feedback, as well as I've probably emailed you and say, hey, I need you to go look at this and do something to this. So just check your email in your Moodle just to make sure that your grades and stuff are uploaded, because what I don't want to happen is we get to week 6 or week 7 and you're missing an assignment, and it's a quick turnaround, you guys. As soon as we finish this course, they give me 1 day to get the grades to them. And so I want to make sure everybody are getting their grades and everything is going through. So please make sure you're checking your emails. And then the last housekeeping thing that I want to talk about is, when we're responding to those forms, you guys always try to respond to at least 3 people. The directions on the sheet say the minimum is 2 people. That's going to always put you at a high B, actually the highest B, which is going to be a 44 out of 50, which actually equivalents to a 88. And I want you to get the full 50 points when you are doing forms, because they are so easy. Responding to 3 people puts you over. On the rubric, it specifically states that the person responded to more than what was required. So please make sure when you're responding now, always try to do 3 people to put you in that A range every time. So you're not losing those easy points, because they're not so challenging, but we have some 100-point assignments, some assignments where you're going to put a little thought into, and I don't want you to give up those easy points. With those forms, just responding to 2 people. So please, please, please make sure that you're responding to up to 3 people. So now let's do some reflection on the assignments we have for week 1. We're going to go all the way back to the very first assignment, the graphic, the culture responsive teaching graphic. And so I'm going to make some connections now that everybody has kind of responded. So the first thing, and I don't have the graphic in front of me, I'm just going to go through my notes. So the first thing we saw was the stake, and it was student-teacher relationships. And so some people in the class asked, oh, I wonder, was this done purposely? Is this a connection to relationships? Yes, it was done purposely. Relationships are so important when you're talking about cultural responsive practices, approaches, teaching, discipline. Relationships is the glue and the piece to bring all the rest of it together. So let's just go through it. So when we're talking about those relationships, we're talking about caring teachers and teachers who can empower kids. Those teachers have those high expectations for their students. They are not only concerned about the students' well-being at school, but they empower them to be successful outside of the classroom, outside of school as well. And so that's that whole teacher-student relationship piece. Then another food item on that plate talked about teaching the whole child. And this one is very, very important in our urban city schools. This means that we're going to kind of bridge home, community, and school all in one, where we are bringing all that alive for kids. So people in the community are coming to schools, are coming to classrooms and visit. I'm bringing some home learning, some home, connecting the parents and families into that. So it's extended learning beyond the curriculum, the tier 1 curriculum. That means the teacher is being very intentional. And if we are a leader, we are being very intentional about integrating those resources that they reflect the students in the classroom, their backgrounds in the classroom, where we're being very intentional about bringing those community leaders in. We're being very intentional about having those family nights, those STEM nights, all those things. We're being very intentional about those wraparound services that helps our kids. You guys, with the teaching the whole child, one piece that we really need to focus on is really addressing the social and the emotional needs of these kids. That's a big piece to the teaching the whole child, that we're not only giving them the instructional and the academic side, but we are also teaching them and really being in tune to their social and emotional needs. And then another piece of the food item on the plate was developmental appropriateness, you guys. And that's just talking about learning styles and teaching styles, that we are really, really being cautious and reflective on our teaching styles, which we're engaging in multiple teaching styles and learning styles, so that we can make sure that most to all of our kids can be successful. We are differentiating some instruction and scaffolding so that most of our kids can really, really master what we are doing in our classroom. Then it pushes us down and talk us about equity and excellence. And you guys, right here is teacher disposition. Kids know when you like them. They know when you like them. Assume they can stay with you for 10 minutes and know, do you have high expectations for them? And do you really, really care for them? It don't take a rocket scientist. And some teachers think they can psych kids out, but you can't. They know when you truly care about them. And so that's where this equity and excellence come in, where that teacher truly supports and facilitate learning opportunities, but also not only that, provide that one-on-one, that individualized attention and encouragement that empowers students, where students want to please you. They want to do right. They want to give you their best because you empower them. And then it brings us to the last one on that graphic, was identity and achievement. And that means we're talking about the identity development, cultural heritage, and diversity. And this is the true picture of transforming and bringing forth culture responsive to life, where we're transferring education from a traditional school setting to being more responsive by respecting and adapting to the cultures of students. So we really, really, really are in tune to the kids in our class. We recognize their strengths, we recognize their accomplishments, and we use that to build a sense of belonging, to really, really, really encourage them and make them feel a part of, like they really, truly belong to the community, because they know that, hey, I recognize things about you. So all of those things really come forth, and all of those things blend together. They integrate together to build a cultural responsive classroom, a cultural responsive campus. All of those things have to be addressed and have to be really, really done intentionally to make sure that a cultural responsive transformation is coming and taking place in the classroom or on the school campus. I will say this, and I stand firm by it. If you have a teacher who is high performing, that teacher is already doing a lot of these things. I don't care if you go to a D school, a F school, a C school, a B school, or an A school. If that teacher is a high performing teacher, that teacher is pretty much, now I won't say that they are in tune to all 5 of these things, but they are in tune to these things. Then they are truly building a sense of community where kids really feel empowered. So now let's go into our chapter 1 assignment. And one of the main questions that I want to focus on tonight is, why was culturally responsive, or why is culturally responsive better when we're thinking about underserved kids? You guys, it's better because these kids come to us, one, broken. They come to us abused. They come to us with 3 to 5 ACEs. It's 80% of the kids that are going to urban city schools, neighborhood schools, low performing schools. Those kids have 3 to 5 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, what they are dealing with. They come to us as struggling learners. So these kids are come to us truly disconnected from a school. They truly are disconnected. So if we don't use these culture responsive approaches to really, really hook these kids, we won't get them to work to their fullest potential. We won't get them to actually behave and really understand the importance of school if we are not in tune to them to build that sense of belonging and that sense of community and that sense of, hey, you are important because I recognize your differences. I recognize your backgrounds and all those things. If we don't go over and beyond as teachers and leaders in these schools to do those things, we will not get those kids to perform to their highest potential. And so then the other question was, what are some concrete things that we do as far as when we think and see examples of cultural responsive? And I just pulled a couple of them out. I heard someone wrote about choose a quote. When my kids first come, I make them choose a quote that relates to them, and then they have to be able to tell everybody why it relates to them. So they build that sense of community. They build that sense of, hey, I belong because my voice is important. So that's just a culture responsive approach. Again, most people are moving to a shift into flex seating, where kids, when they come in, they have a different seat every day. Kids get to choose their seat and all those kind of things. But again, it builds a sense of community and a sense of belonging. One person talked about Wish You Well, where Emily say in her classroom how she really builds community by her kids really check on each other when they come. If a kid has been out of school and the kids go up and greet them, oh, I miss you yesterday. Let me get your homework for you. All those things build a sense of community where that classroom is now becoming a culture responsive classroom where those kids feel empowered. Those kids feel like, hey, I belong here. And then one person talked about how the classroom should be some two elements in the classroom should be patience and understanding. You guys, as I was reading through these on yesterday and today, I was just thinking, what if most of our classroom teachers really had those two traits, where I can walk into your room and know that, hey, patience and understanding is reflected here. We wouldn't have the discipline we have. We wouldn't have kids not wanting to come to school. We wouldn't have a lot of things because kids are feel empowered. So it's very important that we begin to really, really reflect on those practices, which actually push us to our next assignment, which is a culture responsive assessment about your classroom or about your school. Everybody did the assessment, went through some indicators and then scored themselves and did some reflecting. And so I just want to highlight some things that I noticed with some trends. One of the trends I noticed on this was one of the main ones that came across as a challenge was using culture responsive materials and content in the curriculum. You guys, that is so hard with us being a tier 1 curriculum or Louisiana state standards or Common Core, because most of our curriculums are tier 1 are tier 1 curriculums, and they are scripted, they are already purchased. And so most of the time when teachers are doing, their lesson plans are already done. They just got to go and annotate them to put those supports in for kids. And so it's very hard to go and put cultural stuff into those lesson plans. So my thing is a challenge. It's a major challenge. Can it be done? Yes, but it takes a lot of work and planning on the teacher part, because number one, if you're going to push things into those already aligned lesson plans, you got to make sure that you don't take away from that and the intent of that lesson. So it's very important that, hey, if I want to go pull a book, African American heritage book or something, that book has to be aligned to whatever that standard is requesting for that actual lesson. So teachers have to do a good job of vetting resources when it comes to really pushing that in there. So I can see why that can be a challenge across the board, but you guys, it can be done. And so when we talk about how some things happen and how do we make these things happen. Some of you in the classroom know, if you read my bio, you read the background about me, but I used to be a turnaround principal. So I was a school turnaround principal. So I want to go through some cultural responsive approaches that I did to really transform my campus to become culture responsive. And so pretty much when I became a principal, I was a turnaround principal, and my school was reconstituted, which everybody in my school was terminated. Before I got there, they had to reapply for their jobs again in the district, and I got a chance to staff the entire school. And so with that is, my school went from being, and at first it went from being a K-5 school to a pre-K3 school, and then after 2 years, it began to add fourth grade, fifth grade, and the rest of the grades. But what happened is I had kids from all over. So my kids came from 3 different schools, 3 different neighborhoods, rival neighborhoods. So I know I had to put some cultural responsive things in place if I really, really wanted to hook those kids and get those kids to be bought in to what I needed them to do to really move the school. So one of the first things I did was I know these kids had no social skills. The school was a F school, a failing school for 8 consecutive years, did not get off the F list. I know the kids, 80% of the kids were tier 3 kids. All the percentiles when it talks about core proficiencies was in the 20th percentile and below. So I know the kids were struggling learners. So there were some things that I had to do that were culturally responsive to really get these kids bought into it. So one of the main things that controlled my whole entire school was houses. I put my kids into houses, and the houses controlled everything. It controlled everything. And so every grade level in my school was a house. And so what I did was I attached everything the kids did wrong when I did analysis of the school. Everything they did wrong, I attached it to the house system. So they got points for doing that particular thing right. It helped to build community where they had community meetings. It helped them to hold each other accountable. It helped them to really work together with team building. Every month they had team building and all those things. But it controlled the whole entire campus with that to really build that sense of community where kids felt a sense of belonging, that they belonged to something that was positive, and it wasn't a gang or something on the streets and all those things. It was something that's very positive. The next thing I did was, because they came from 3 different schools that had 3 different sets of expectations, I put school-wide transitions, routines, and expectations in place where every kid knew the exact same routines. Every classroom, pre-K through all the way through 5th grade, had the exact same way how we leave out, how we come in, how we walk, how we do everything. Everybody had the same transitions. And so therefore I could hold them accountable, children and teachers accountable. So when I'm walking and looking at these transitions, I can make sure I correct kids immediately. And then I talk to teachers probably about, hey, I didn't see you doing what we were required to do. But it really, really transpired. So when my kindergartners got to 1st grade, they didn't have to learn new procedures and routines. When my 3rd graders got to 5th grade, they didn't have to learn new routines and procedures and those things. They knew it was the school way. It was called a midway way when it came to it. Another thing about cultural responsive is I had to do a whole different approach of discipline where I didn't want to put kids out of school. So therefore I began to form struggling learners club. I knew I had a group of Black males who were struggling learners. Teachers they couldn't read. They could cause problems in class. So I began to say, hey, just send them to me, and when it's time for them to start reading and when it's time for them to start writing, and I'll be their teacher for 1 hour per day. So I had to be able to be very creative and build these things in place so that these kids will begin to still like school and still be able to do their work and not want to go home when it comes to that. And another thing, when it talks about how do we involve the parents, because there was a thing that came up on the survey, how do we really make that connection with parents? You guys, of course, most schools do the family math nights, the family reading nights, the STEM nights, and all those things. But one thing that really connected my parents is every time parents came or every activity I took pictures of it. And within a week, I would have those pictures blown up into posters, and I would put them throughout our school. So our school had parents all over it. So when anytime a parent walked into the school, they saw nothing but themselves and their kids. And kids, anytime they walked from the cafeteria to the PE room, to the art room, they saw nothing but their parents and them. And so it really built a sense of community where we was really culturally aware of our population and our demographics. So those are just some things I did to really, really, really transform our school from a traditional school to a culturally responsive campus. So now we're going to talk about this week. What is required for this week? This week, you are required to interview a school leader or a principal on cultural responsive classroom management. I've given you a list of questions on the directions in week 2. You can use those same questions, but the most important thing, you guys, you got to write it in narrative form. I want to make sure it's written in a narrative form, so you won't go question 1. This is what they said. Question 2. This is what they said. You want to make sure that you kind of summarize and synthesize all of those things. But the main piece that I'm going to really look at, I'm going to be honest, is your reflection. I want you to be able to take what that principal or what that leader said, and I want you to connect it to what we have talked about in week 1 and week 2 in this class, what you have talked about and responded to on the forums, what you've heard people say on the forums. I want you to make some connections on, does that leader or that principal or that leader that you interviewed have a true understanding of cultural responsive classroom management, or this, what they said aligns to the text because the text said this, or it aligns to what we've talked about because we said this, or like, oh, I can really offer them some suggestions around it. So you're really not trying to drill them for information. You're just trying to see what are their viewpoints and what are their thoughts about culturally responsive classroom management. And then you want to make sure that you connect it to our book and also what we've talked about on the forums in this course. And then the last assignment is chapter 2 forum. And you guys, that's just really reading chapter 2, which is a very interesting chapter. It talks about classroom management and connecting it to the cradle to prison pipeline. You guys, the chapter is extremely interesting because what you're going to find out in the chapter, especially that part, a lot of things that we are doing in our urban city schools, we are sending our kids to prison. We are really sending them some of our approaches, some of our techniques, some of our behaviors as leaders and teachers. We are actually sending them to prison. And so it's very important that you just really read that chapter and focus on that. And then, you have your reflective questions that you'll respond to at the end once you read, which I think is 1 or 2 questions. But it's an interesting read. This chapter is very interesting. And so that's pretty much all I have. Again, I will post this Zoom if you forgot, if you logged in late or you forgot to write down something so that you can have all these notes. And if you have questions, you can actually unmute yourself and ask questions, and then we'll go from there. We have about 9 minutes left on our actual Zoom time. And if you don't have questions, then we'll end. But if you got questions and you got comments, you can actually unmute and then log on, and we can go from there. So, Starla, I see you reading. I know you probably know a lot of this, especially with that charter school background, because what I do find is charter schools do a lot of cultural responsive. They do way more than public schools when it comes to cultural responsive. So I know you probably got a lot that you can help us out in those forums. All right, y'all. So there's no questions like Starla did put. She said, "Yeah, I know some stuff, but I'm still struggling." So she said, "I can't wait to read this chapter. This chapter is really good when it comes to it." So you guys, we're gonna go on and end, and I can't wait to next week when we can really talk about some things that you really notice, your aha moments of this chapter, especially those root causes and contributors to the prison pipeline. You're going to be very shocked when you see some of the stuff, because I promise you, if we walk our schools, we'll see a lot of those things in play, a lot of those actions into play. So again, we always end with our motivation, you guys. Excuses are tools of the incompetent. They are used to build monuments of nothingness. Those who specialize in their uses are seldom capable of doing anything else. Therefore, on today and any other day, when talking about culturally responsive schools, we will not make excuses. Have a good one. See you guys on next week. And again, I'll post this in about an hour. Y'all have a good one and be safe.